Hello, writer, and welcome back to my life. Writer Wednesday, the day where I give you my best tips and advice on the art and the business of writing and tell you how to do what to do as an indie author. As per usual, today we're answering a question from one of my $5 patrons on Patreon, and today's question comes to us from thatninja, who asks, how do you write about sensitive topics in a way that doesn't trivialize or glorify them? Thanks for the question, thatninja. I really like thatninja. So, to be clear, when we talk about sensitive topics, we're talking about things like bigotry and violence against people who suffered those things disproportionately. This is the part where I warn you that there will be discussion of sensitive topics in this video. We will be talking about sexual assault, we will be talking about racism and other forms of bigotry. If that's not your thing, no problem at all. Just want to let you know up front. So first, I have talked in previous Writer Wednesday videos about how to write narratives that are not your own, and my general advice sums up to probably don't. Like, I try just not to take other people's narratives, so in a lot of cases I won't talk about these things at all. But sometimes they do enter into the work, and of course it is important to treat them with respect when they do. And I like that you separated trivializing and glorifying these things in your question, because some people see them as opposite ends of the spectrum, which is not true at all. I think that there's a couple of different ways that you can trivialize subjects like this, but one of the most annoying to me is by making it seem as though these things are the default, the standard, and they're always going to exist no matter what. So the TV show Game of Thrones, more so than the book series A Song of Ice and Fire, just seems to assume that sexual assault is a thing that happens all the time. It's so baseline and common that it's not worth commenting about. In fact, it's so trivial that it gets into the realm of glorifying it, which is why I do not consider these things to be opposites of each other. They often end up kind of going in the same direction. You avoid trivializing these things by treating them with the severity and the weight that they deserve, and by showing the real world consequences of what happens when these things occur to real people. And in order to do that, your character work has to be good enough that your audience, your reader, or your viewer, or whatever, actually cares about the characters that these things are happening to. Spoiler alert for the 5th book in the Nightblade epic. If you are reading the Nightblade epic and you have not read the book Weremage, I'm about to discuss a big ass spoiler for that book, so don't watch this next part. The one instance of on-the-page sexual assault that happens in the books of Underrealm is at the end of Weremage, when Lauren's boyfriend, lover, whatever you want to call him, Chet, is sexually assaulted by another character. Granted, the reader was always supposed to have some problems with Chet. His relationship with Lauren is not as ideal as it could be, but I always felt very connected and empathetic towards him, and I hope that most readers did as well. So I hope that what happened to Chet did not seem trivial to the reader, because it was an awful thing that affected him very deeply. One way that people often trivialize topics like this is by only having these awful bad things happen to people who either are bad themselves, and so you get this weird idea that they sort of deserved it, which is not okay, or it happens to somebody who just kind of doesn't matter to the story, or who the reader doesn't really care about. Like if you have some character being really, really racist to servants or even slaves in a narrative who we otherwise never learn about or experience at all as characters, then you're not making it out to be some bad thing, except in the sense that you're supposed to not like this character because he's racist, but it loses its impact because you're refusing to confront the reality of what that's doing to the victim. After the sexual assault scene happened at the end of Weremage, Chet then went on into the next book, and you got to see the actual consequences of what that did to him over the next, period of time, and it was not good. He suffered from extreme PTSD, it strained all of his relationships, and it wasn't his fault, and it was never made to be his fault whatsoever. This is a reality that a lot of people face when this happens to them, and I thought that it was important to confront that, rather than just having it be a thing that happened and then the story moves on. But then we get into the subject of glorifying it. How do you avoid glorifying these things? Well, this gets into a lot of things like style and presentation and execution, and it's something that you really do want to be careful about. First of all, I just want to say from my own perspective, I want to put a moratorium on any more stories like Fight Club. The thing about Fight Club is that Tyler Durden is a bad guy. You are not supposed to like him. He is awful, he is misogynistic, he is violent, and he's just criminal. But the story does all the things to set him up as somebody who is to be liked and respected, so that you understand why the characters in the book like and respect him. But then you as a reader are supposed to do another level of reading and go, oh my god, this guy is the worst, and I understand now the process by which someone who is just awful gains a following and gains respect and gets other people to do awful things. The problem is that so many people don't do that extra layer of reading, and so you have the legions of Fight Club fanboys who want to be like Tyler Durden. And this is what happens when you pull this trick, when you say, I'm gonna make the main characters so awful that everyone's gonna realize, boy, nobody should ever be that awful and we should all change our ways. This is the same mentality of we're going to invent a bigger bomb because then the bomb is going to be so horrible that war will end forever. Didn't work for the nuke. Didn't work for Fight Club. Stop it! And yeah, the rest of the advice on avoiding glorification is just kind of the same thing. Don't ever, for 1 second, let your reader think that it's okay to enjoy what's going on. Obviously, there is one thing that you cannot help, and that is that there are always going to be people reading your book or watching your film or consuming your content, whatever it is, that are going to agree with what's going on no matter what you do. But I think that you should try to avoid that as much as you possibly can, knowing you will never completely 100% succeed, by making it very clear and obvious in the text, as clear as you can make it without beating the reader over the head, that this is not okay, that this is not something that should be happening, that it is evil, and that it is harmful. Returning to Game of Thrones again, TV show more so than the books. The books a little bit, don't get me wrong, but the TV show just goes overboard with it. Rape is just constant. It just happens all the time, and it's awful. It's just horrible. But the TV show never seems to treat it as something horrible. It seems to treat it in the same way that it treats violence. And here's what I mean by that. Normally in Game of Thrones, when you have scenes of violence, you are looking at violence that has been entered into by both sides equally. In other words, it's a fight. Two people have said, hey, you know what we're gonna do now? We're gonna fight. And they do. And the most upsetting scenes in Game of Thrones, the ones that get everybody crying and cause huge internet uproar, are the scenes of violence as betrayal. The Red Wedding, the death of Ned Stark, spoiler for Game of Thrones, but like, you know already. These are situations where both participants have said, you know what, we are not going to do violence towards each other, and then one of them betrays it and kills a beloved character. That is treated in the show's own meta-narrative as more shocking and upsetting than the scenes of sexual violence. They are filmed, they are shot, and they are discussed the same way as a fight scene, like the fight scene between Brienne of Tarth and the Hound. That was filmed in the same way as the rape of Sansa Stark. And that's not okay. It's not the same thing. Both participants have not agreed that they're gonna fuck each other up. One of them has just said, I'm going to do what I want to do to you no matter what. That is horrifying and vicious. And yet it is treated and filmed with less care, less respect, and less severity than the beheading of Ned Stark, which was a tremendously powerful emotional moment. So to avoid trivialization, make sure that your reader cares about the person that the awful thing is happening to, so that it's not just happening off in the background noise of your world. And to avoid glorification, never, ever let your reader think that what is going on is okay. Have it in the text that it is known that this is not okay, not acceptable, and should not be tolerated by any person with any spark of decency. Thank you so much for the question, That Ninja. I hope you and others found the answer helpful. A reminder to everyone else that my $5 patrons on Patreon, like That Ninja, get these videos 2 weeks in advance, and they're also the only ones who can request topics for future videos. If that sounds good to you, check out my Patreon link in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next Wednesday. Bye!